I'm Nico Hauwert, and my position here is the program manager for the Balcones Canyonland Preserve for the City of Austin, Austin Water Utility Department. Well, in the case of the Golden Cheek Warbler, the issue isn't so much. There were just a very limited number back in the 1980s when they were listed as endangered. However, the threat to their habitat hasn't gone away. In fact, what's happened is that even though we've acquired 30,000 acres of preserve land for the Golden Cheek Warbler, the threat of urbanization is much more, there's much more urbanization that's occurred since 1986. Mm-hmm. And so even if we were to keep that 30,000 acres, you know, these guys migrate from Mexico, and they're only found in Texas and central Texas in this area. So as long as there's going to be urbanization, there's going to be decreasing habitat, and there are going to be threats to the existence. And there are some secondary benefits in addition to saying it's bird habitat. And part of it is, of course, there's also lands that a separate program called Water Quality Protection Lands acquired primarily in South Austin. And part of the goal of acquiring this, of course, is that our economy is tied with our natural resources, that people move here because they like natural resources. For the most part, at least it's a marketable feature about our area. People might accept lower paying jobs to live in this area because they can enjoy the natural resources, and it's part of our economy. People can go swimming at Barton Springs, they can go hiking down the Greenbelt, you know, they can see Hays County. The surveys indicate that people move there because they like to live in the country, you know. So if it was all quarries next to them or building, the people might not necessarily like to live there anymore. And the same for the residents of Austin and also Williamson County. But in addition to that, we realized that, you know, our water supply, our permanent water supply, that if we had an urbanized area, you know, there's not any degree of engineering that we have now that's marketable that we could produce water off an urbanized area. So it requires that we have rural areas, and right now we're blessed with a very large rural watershed of the Colorado River that has not been urbanized yet. And that's part of why we have such excellent water quality. The City of Austin is because we have a rural watershed up gradient of us. Now, by acquiring the property in Texas, as you know, that's going to ensure that portions of them will always be rural, undeveloped, producing excellent quality, won't be having potential pollution sources, petroleum storage tanks, you know, urban runoff, wastewater that could potentially contaminate our water supply. So we're also investing in protecting the water supply as well. Okay, so there are several aspects, some approaches on that question you ask. One of them is strictly a regulatory issue, is that we do have federal regulations that require that when species become endangered and listed endangered, which a number of our cave invertebrates are, that we're required to take steps to protect them. And that's because, okay, we don't care about anyone else. What does it matter to us? Well, there's federal regulations that want to preserve them for future generations, whether we're care about it or not, you know. And so we are required by federal regulation and a permit that we developed with the Department of the Interior back in 1996, that we would protect a number of caves. And part of what that allows is it allows surety to people, for example, who want to develop by acquiring and protecting these 62 caves. We're ensuring that other caves can potentially be damaged and the invertebrates in them through development, which many of them are. And the species will still be viable in the future. So that's the strictly regulatory aspect. And the permit we have for protecting a certain number of caves and areas allows development in the other areas. Otherwise, there would be a regulatory nightmare to have to review every single development that's going to go on by Fish and Wildlife to make sure that that's not going to have a large effect on the whole system in general, because we have the surety of the permit. So that actually gives some comfort to people who want to develop in the area, and allows it to be easier to develop in the area because we've protected a limited number. Now, from a human aspect of it, is that the cave invertebrates, just like we do, they need water, they need space. So if we don't appreciate the open space that they appreciate as well, there's the aspect that they need clean water just like we do. So if we don't care about the water quality going into the caves that comes down the aquifer, comes out of our wells, comes out the springs that feed the Colorado River, eventually it will be a concern when we start having more pathogenic outbreaks, these kind of problems. So the cave species, by protecting them, we're also helping to protect our water supply and making our city more livable and marketable for people who want to come here and want to enjoy the natural resources as well. And it's part of our economy. We realize that once it's no longer a natural resource focused city, people are going to want to move somewhere else. So we better have the shopping malls and the restaurants and everything to replace those, because they're not going to come here for the natural resources anymore.